change in guidelines of the American Academy of Pediatrics. He says that children struggling with obesity should be evaluated and treated early and aggressively, including 12-year-olds to undergo surgery and medication in addition to intensive diet, exercise, lifestyle interventions. The guidelines aim to reset the inaccurate view of obesity as a personal problem or a failure of the person's diligence, and to consider obesity as a biological problem and a complex chronic disease. They've gone on to say, yeah, left untreated, health problems, high blood pressure, diabetes, depression can be the kind of sequelae of not treating obesity. And this has caused a bit of uproar. I had a lot of people being like, oh, Yusuf, what's your take on this? Because I suppose I kind of straddle the ground between preventative lifestyle-based interventions and reactive medicine.
I feel like you're slowly hot potatoing me here. I feel like you're saying things that aren't an opinion and waiting for me to say my opinion.
Oh, see, no, I was taking a sip of my tea, but
you were just
no, but feel free to chime in.
I don't have the medical view. So I was certainly overweight as a kid. It's really difficult for me to give like a valid opinion that would apply to other people that aren't just me. But I'm actually grateful that I had that experience, just because I think being overweight was kind of, and the bullying that kind of came about as a result of it was the trigger to getting into fitness and learning about nutrition and training, and what has ultimately dictated like what I do for a living. And I think had I not had that experience, had I just been a healthy weight my entire life, I doubt I would have been in the position I'm in now. So I kind of look back on that and actually, I'm sure it's not a very healthy thing to happen, like to spend your childhood years overweight. But I think from a big picture perspective, would I go back and undo it? Probably not. Had I had a medical intervention at 12 to force that to not happen, I wouldn't have then, you're not then pushed down the road of like, look, you're overweight, you need to figure this out. Like you need to change your habits, change your lifestyle, learn how ultimately to build this different version of this that's going to last. You've just been dealt with by a hospital or a doctor.
Yeah, that is fascinating as a perspective of like you very much are grateful for it. You see it as a catalyst for pushing you into a road that's fundamentally led to like why we're sat here doing a podcast. So like a multi-decade change in your kind of life path and identity and all these and health markers and everything else. Yes, of course, some people would argue like, well, not everyone has a rocky moment when they're 13 and that becomes a catalyst. But there's definitely a frame shift of you take a 12-year-old, you over-medicalize them, you put them on a GLP-1 agonist, and you offer liposuction. I imagine if you'd had that, what that's sub-communicating to the child is, do you know what? Don't worry, your agency over your own health, let's take that away because you've got a medical problem and we're going to do stuff to you and that'll solve it. Now, yes, from a epidemiological risk perspective or from a outcomes perspective, like perhaps that's going to reduce your risk of high blood pressure and stuff in future, assuming you can keep the weight off, which is a big if. And I don't know if we have data on that. If you put a 12-year-old on exenatide, one of these drugs, like they're pretty new drugs. I can't imagine we have data on putting kids on them. And then assuming there's no unknown risks about these drugs too, long term, especially during a endocrinological development phase, like a window where you're going through puberty and everything, you then have potentially given this child something which, can they keep the weight off when they come off the drug? Have they made any fundamental changes to their lifestyle? It's tough because the whole purpose of this guideline change seems to be one about how we interpret obesity, what the meaning of obesity is. So they're saying it aims to reset the view that obesity is a personal problem or a failure of the person's diligence and make it into a biological, complex, chronic disease type problem. Now, it's tough because they're saying it's going to be in addition to lifestyle interventions and so on. Final rant on this, because I've just gone off on one here. If you're 12 and you are obese, you've not had enough time living independently for that to be a personal failing or to be down to a sequence of your personal choices, you're still very much a child you are financially or with any other domain of your life. So it seems like a sledgehammer to just instantly medicalize the child, do lots of stuff to them, even if it is diet and exercise and stuff, and not to account for the family environment and the parents and all of the supporting structures that's led to that point. Because we're just seeing a snapshot of a kid at 12 years old.
Yeah. And yeah. Because how much control do they have over the meals they eat, the food they eat, when they eat, the portion sizes? Like, you assume not that much at 12. Like, maybe they're starting to have some say in it, but they certainly aren't like going to the shop on a weekly basis and buying the groceries and deciding what they're eating. There is some agency taken away from it. So for that to then be like, right, you've passed this threshold where you now have to use medication to manage this. Like, you're being put into this category where we're saying your route forward now is medication. You've kind of not given them a chance. Like that, again, back to my story, like it was really when I was like 15, 16, when I decided to, right, kind of old enough to realize that this equals this, that like looking like this equals an undesirable scenario, series of events in life. And these behaviors lead to looking like this. So I'm going to learn to change these behaviors. And that then led to the cascade of like, how do I stick? Ultimately, they're enjoyable, right? If you like lose weight yourself and you see the results yourself, and you've got abs, and that was stuff you did, I think that's the trigger to be like, I'll probably do this for the rest of my life now, because so many positive things come from that.
Yeah, 100%. And you kind of in there that like it was only at 16 that you started to connect. My physical status has an impact on how people react to me socially and my sexual identity and how girls respond to me and all these kind of things that at 12 you just want to eat ice cream and play video games. Like, you haven't got this long-term thinking. You haven't even developed the cortical tissue to make those kind of long-term decisions.
I don't know, maybe you'll tell me differently, and this is kind of my knowledge on this stops. Like, is having a period of time when you're 12, having a high body fat percentage, like, is that going to have some sort of long lasting health consequence that can't be reversed?
I think most of the consequences of obesity can be reversed. There are some kind of intra-arterial stuff that will be a lot slower to get rid of, and there's this thing about the rewiring of your brain and adipocytes being semi-permanent and all that kind of stuff. But is there a need to medicalize the child at 12? I think is the key question, isn't it? Like, I'm all for school interventions of Jamie Oliver going around and getting rid of the smiley face potatoes and all the behavioral stuff, like, brilliant, and adapting the environment that kids are in. But it's a parenting problem. And by removing agency from a child so early on and subcommunicating, it's not really in their hands. I don't think we're doing them any favors.
It also seems like an odd thing to, like, going to mandate something when someone's 12 and you're going to make something like a rule, or you're going to have a say in it. Why not make it such that like they're forced to exercise a certain number of, do you know what I mean? Like, why, if I'm 12 and someone's like, I'm going to do this thing to you now, like, I'm going to give you this medication. So we're assuming it's out of their hands anyway, right? They're not going to be able to sit with a doctor and have an informed conversation about the pros and cons of the medication. Like, they're going to be given the medication by their parents or by the doctor. So why not just mandate other things? Like, why not just say, right, for the next 90 days, you've got to do 75 hard. Like, just make them all do 75 hard, but like a 12-year-old friendly version. I know that sounds ridiculous. And people are like, oh, you shouldn't force children to vaccine, but we're forcing children to take drugs here.
Well, surgery, like, we can't assume. So surgery has a significant risk. There's the risk of the surgery and the recovery and the infection risk and all those kind of things. But there's also the risk of anesthetic, which is also a non-zero risk, and you can die from anesthetic. So as a doctor, if I have a patient where I'm thinking, recommending general anesthetic and surgery for something which, like, we haven't really got an established cost-benefit ratio for that population at that stage in their life, it's quite hard to justify. Because imagine you're the doctor, you recommend a 12-year-old to do that. We don't know if they could have adjusted their risk factors and lifestyle through another means. And let's say it's the one kid that does die on the operating table from anesthetic complication. How do you explain to the parents?
Yeah.
Say, well, on balance, we think – on a population level, it's probably a good decision, but
it's when you look at the one case, it's when the macro considerations go out the window, isn't it? Like having the conversation with those parents doesn't really matter what the big picture data says. It's like ultimately their child was overweight and there was an intervention put in place that caused them to lose their life. It's not really justifiable.
And you go, why does he recommend the surgery? Well, it's to stop them dying earlier.
Ridiculous.
Well, like
Ridiculous. Yeah. I just think at that stage in your life, and it's kind of, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but it's like the gender discussion at that age as well. At that stage in your life, like I don't have that many clear memories of being 12. And even when I'm like 18, like you kind of think I've got all this figured out, but realistically you don't for another like decade, right? And even then, it's like the thing of like, as soon as you feel like you've got it figured out, that's when
we
you're
only
wrong.
think that we've got it figured out, and then in 10 years' time, we're like, God, we were idiots at 32. Like,
yeah, like 50-year-old versions of us will be looking back on these clips, going, "These two are twats. They haven't got a clue." So like that age, and you're just figuring out the kind of the basics of like. The thing is, I suppose I'm talking about a version of all of this that is within a range where like you change your habits and then it'll be sorted out. What I don't really know is like someone's severely obese when they're 12 and that's just going to continue trending to be worse, which I assume is like what is driving these interventions.
probably, yeah, but it's where do you set the threshold? Because my question is, do you know at the age of 12 whether somebody is intractably obese, like that they just that's it, a death sentence, and there's nothing you can do to change? You have to intervene with surgery now at 12. It seems very heavy-handed.
I wonder how many of the people who like appear on fitness magazines were overweight at 12. I bet it's a really high percentage. I bet there's like the people who are overweight at that age, that's the thing that drives them into fitness.
I'm so fascinated by this thing of like Genesis story argument, because you literally lived that.
Yeah, well, I suppose like you lived just a different version of it, right? Like from the other side of that equation. Like your journey was like building muscle, adding size.
Yeah, but
That's what drove
I
it.
remember what my diet was like at 12, and it was completely hedonistic. It was just
Right.
sweets to satiety, play PlayStation, but it just happens that my appetite was lower than my maintenance. I didn't end up obese, but yeah.
Yeah, genuinely, like I'm thankful for that being the way that things were. I'm sure if I could go back and experience like the week to week of it, I probably wouldn't be thankful of it. Like the experience of it at the time was largely quite unpleasant. But I think a lot of things that happen in life, like a lot of good outcomes, are kind of born out of this unpleasant starting point and you wanting to fix it. Because like if you remove all of the like what we do about the problem of someone who is 12 and obese, they have to at some point, at some level, whether it's through medical intervention or changing their own behaviors, they have to really want to maintain the changed outcome, right? They have to want to not be obese anymore.
100%. And
And that has to
that's
come from
where, like,
something.
if you whip agency away from a child at that age when it's formative, like, how does that impact how they see their approach? I mean, well, they're fundamentally saying in this policy change, like, we are changing it from a personal problem to a biological one, which many people would interpret as like you've got autoimmune liver disease. Like, it's just, don't worry, give it to us as the doctors, we'll handle it.
And, well, if anything, I think it's likely to exaggerate the behaviors that led to obesity in the first place, because like there's almost this safety net of like
Moral hazard.
yeah, in some ways.
So I guess it comes down to the like agency of a 12-year-old. And as you said, there's a reason that you're not allowed to get a tattoo before the age of 18, because before the age of 18, you're an idiot.
I don't think there's anything you can really legally do that's fun at 12.
That's fun and permanent, like that has permanent consequences on your
Yeah.
life.
Or may impact other people.
Because you can choose your career at 12, that's fine, because it's changeable. You can decide again, it doesn't make a big difference.
It
Like,
also
really
doesn't
think,
really kick in for another couple of years, whatever you pick. Like you can change your mind at 13 and 14 and 15 and it still doesn't really matter.
yeah, and if you need to do another GCSE or something, then you can do it at 20. Oh
Yeah.
man, I've had recurring dreams recently that for some reason I needed 2 A levels in like an obscure topic, and I hadn't done any studying for it because I've been like, oh, it's bollocks. I don't need A levels. And then the exam's coming up. I'm like, oh shit! Like, there's no way I can do this in a week.
Do you ever wish that you could face like A levels now? If you put like you now, like your level of maturity and organization into your old Yusuf and go through that again, how simple it would all feel?
I think it was still a big chunk of work, and it was still quite hard.
Totally.
But
Totally. But you're giving that to like the version of you that is just
much more evolved. Yeah.
and I feel that about like me at uni as well. You're given these huge bodies of work and projects to complete and deadlines to manage, and
Oh, yeah. And you're up against the most impulsive, stupid version of yourself
yeah,
having to deal with it.
it's just
Yeah.
last man standing, isn't it? Really, like the test is, can you just about cling on and get through this without like, doing anything really damaging to anyone or anything?
This is exactly Johnny's argument for saying if you're going to hire someone with a degree, not because of anything to do with the content of the degree, but because it communicates, I can sit on my arse for 4 years and do a series of tasks and turn up at a location and do a thing and collect a paper at the end of it.
It's analogy we were talking about the other day. I don't think it was on a podcast, but like you're through school, all the way through school, you're the glider that's being towed into the air by another plane, and you reach this altitude, and then you get unclipped, and the plane goes away, and suddenly you're like, oh shit, and that's you at uni because suddenly the structures of like no one's checking in on you. There's no like lesson timetable that's strict. You can just not go to lectures and nothing happens.
Yeah.
And there's just 3 years, and you either get a degree at the end of it or you don't.
That's, yeah, exactly that. So they have to have a way to signal the person hasn't crashed and burned on the glider.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's a degree, fine. If it's like, hey, here's a URL, here's a web app that I wrote, brilliant. Okay, they're able to turn up or here's my Kelly criterion, which is like, here's my portfolio performance, meaning you've been able to look at a lot of data, synthesize it, turn up every day, manage the risk, generate a certain profitability. It's just a very, what do they call it? In like unfakeable flex.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a before and after with a newspaper.
Yeah. Body is another business card, isn't it?
Just one more thing on that. I'm slowly realizing about myself that the things that I aspire to achieve the most are the things that can't be, where the outcome can't just be purchased.
Yeah.
So like having a big deadlift, being lean, having a low golf handicap, having a big turnover in your business, you can't just like muscle your way into any of those things. Like what it shows is I dedicated a decade of my life to this outcome and achieved it.
That's why people get so annoyed at people who cheat in drug tested competitions.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Or people who like grow businesses through illegitimate or immoral means.
Yeah, I think even within the tech startup world, there's still a point of pride about bootstrapping a company versus getting funding from VC or family.
There's a Netflix documentary series about Bernie Madoff and his Ponzi scheme. I'd recommend it. I think you didn't. It's just insane. Just flagrant.
Have a look.
It's worth watching.
It's another one on the list. I've been watching Handmaid's Tale on your recommendation as well.
Oh God, man, you're like, I think I probably watched that in like 2018.
Really working through the queue.
What were we going to talk about? Is that it?
So we were going to talk about how much do you earn as an online coach, but okay. I think since we've solved the obesity crisis, that's probably enough for one episode, isn't it?
I think so. Be really interesting. I think most people listening to this will work with people who are obese, have been obese, are on a weight loss journey of some description. And that is probably one of your expertise. It'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts on this. So either let us know, email us, post on our social media, post on YouTube, like wherever you're consuming this.
There's a voice message as well.
Pipe. the infamous speak pipe.
Just click on the link in the description of this podcast and you can send us a voice note.
Yeah, join the debate. Join the debate.
If you want to be anonymized, you can always put on a silly accent. We won't mind. as long as we can understand you.
If you'd like to email us instead and have us read it out in a silly accent of your choosing, that's also, it's not our
Please
preference, but
specify the accent, though.
but we specify it.
Well, I think they should.
I agree. Yeah.
Lovely.
See you really soon.
You have made it to the end of this video, so I have a special gift for you. I need you to follow this very specific set of steps. So step 1, click the subscribe button below. Step 2, go to the description of this video and follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. I guarantee we will level up the quality of your Instagram feed, your Twitter feed, and therefore the quality of your thoughts and your bank account. Step 3, click the link below that and join the Propane Inner Circle. You get free access to our 7 days to 1K as an online coach program, as well as the online coaching blueprint. And then if you don't want to do any of that and you just want to speak to us directly to work with us, then click the link below that and you can book in a time slot to have a chat with one of the team. Speak soon.